Okay, so in this video, we're going to explore something that I just found out that I guess is supposed to be common knowledge. Apparently, on the 91 to 95 Wrangler YJs, the gas tanks are all the same size, 15 and 20 gallon. No matter what you paid for, you got a 20-gallon tank. What Chrysler did, Dodge, Mopar, whatever you want to call them, is if you didn't pay extra for the 20-gallon tank, they inserted a tube into the fill vent, which made it so you can only put 15 gallons in the 20-gallon tank. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this apart and follow the directions I found online and see if this bare bones cheap 93 that we built, if that's what the issue is. Because with the original sender, the gas gauge was correct. With the 20-gallon sender that I put in it, the gauge only goes to 3/4 or about 3/4. When it's down to around a quarter tank, it only takes 7 to 8 gallons to fill it back up before it wants to overflow out the back of the vehicle coming out of the fill neck. So this could be a quick fix on this, relatively speaking. Now, obviously, it's a little easier because we have a lift. We should be able to do this without dropping the tank. It may be a little bit of a pain in the butt. So first thing we have to do is we have to remove these push pins that are holding this plastic panel on. Once we remove those, remove the panel, it'll give us access to the filler neck and the vent hose for the filler neck. After that, we're going to remove the vent hose for the filler from the gas tank. Then we're going to try and get that tube out, because apparently there should be a tube there no matter what. So we're going to get at it and see what we find. Okay, so to remove this panel, there's going to be a clip here. You're going to pull the center out, and then the whole clip comes off, and there will be 3 here. One above the frame, one in the middle, and then there's one over here that you just can't see because of the screen. Okay, there it is. So we're going to take one of these type of tools, these panel tools. You're going to try and find the one that's the right size, and a very poor light here. You pull the center out, and once the center is pulled, the clip just pops out, and that's what it looks like. If you pull the center completely out, it's not a big deal. Once you pull the whole clip out, just push the center back into the clip part way before you reinsert it into the body. So I'm going to pause while we pull the other 3. Okay, so we've removed this panel. This is your close off panel that goes up in here. And that now exposes all of this. Here's a trailer harness zip tied up in there. So the hose we need to undo is going to be the smaller of the 2. And as you can see, the hose clamp is facing upward. It's going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt, but it shouldn't be the end of the world. And then we need to, once that clamp is off, we need to slide it up the hose, grab the hose and twist it to break the seal, and then pull that hose off, and that'll expose what we need to get to. Now, the reason the hose clamp is facing upward is because when these vehicles originally were assembled, they were fully assembled before the body was set on. So without the body on, you can get to that clamp facing upwards, obviously. Okay, so we now have the clamp loose. I had to use open end combination wrenches and everything else. I turned a tiny bit at a time until I could get it to unscrew with my fingers, swivel it around, and get a better grip on it with the wrenches. It was just in a really bad spot, and there's no other tool that could get to it. It's loose, it's pulled up past the bulge here. There's a bulge, which is what stops your hose from slipping off with the clamp on there. So we're going to take a pair of these. These are actually hose pliers. They are serrated inside to grip the hose. They come in different sizes. They are actually these are great when you're working on fuel or coolant, because what they're actually made for is to grab the hose like that. You squeeze them a little bit, and see how the hose twists now? I've now broken the seal, which means that the hose should pull off relatively easily. There's no sense in fighting a hose that's got a nice, good, tight seal when you can simply take the right tool, twist the hose, and now you should be able to pull the hose off. Now, if you don't have these, you could use, other types of pliers. Whatever will get up in there. You use these. They've got the rounded jaws, squared off jaws, whatever. You can use these. Just open them up to the larger size. They've got rounded jaws inside. What you don't want to do is you don't want to get up in there on this hose or coolant hose or any hose and tear the hose up trying to break it loose. Breaking it loose will allow you to remove the hose more easily, rather than grabbing it and just pulling and twisting and fighting with it, and then all of a sudden it lets loose and you slam your hand into something and potentially rip the hose. Okay, so we've got the hose off. What I ended up having to do is take a pry bar and stick it up through like this and pry on the hose from behind on both sides to work the hose off, because it's very cold here and this is an original 1993 factory hose, so it's a little stiff. Now let's see if we can see up in here. We get a better light. Alright, so there's what we need to remove. See how there's an inner tube and an outer tube? So we need to remove that inner tube. Okay, to get this started, you can now see I've got to pull it out a little bit. To get this started, what I ended up having to do is I took a straight slot screwdriver and I wedged it in between and pried back and forth on it to get a little bit of a pocket. And then I was able to take a smaller screwdriver and do the same thing, and I did it up on top here too. After that, I took me on those vice grips and shoved them into part of it into the inside of the tubing and part of it into the pocket I had made between the gas tank filler and this piece of tubing, and tighten it as tight as it'll go, lock it, and just started pulling on it, and it moved a little bit, so now I can get a better grip. And this is something like 7 to 10 inches long, I believe it said, so this is going to take a bit to work this all the way out. So we'll get back at it and see what the end result is. Okay, so we've got that much hanging out so far, so I'm going to say this is got the 15-gallon conversion or whatever done to it. So what I have figured out to do here, once I had that out a little bit, is take these those pliers and grip as close as I can down here, tighten them, and then take a pry bar. It's gonna be, I can't really do it with take the pry bar. You take the pry bar, you put it against the frame here and pry against these, and you get an inch or two at a time, and then you reposition the needle nose vice grips, because obviously you can only get so far with the pry bar. So using leverage, it seems to be a lot easier. You can see the plastic's wet, so that's going to be gasoline, because I believe this is about as full as it would let me go for right now. And here you have it. Here's your piece of tubing. So this tank was absolutely made to only hold 15 gallons from the factory, and it is about 10 inches long. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a piece about 2 to 2.5 inches off. I'm going to measure real quick and figure out how much we need, because you do need to put this back in apparently as a reinforcement on the inside of that that nipple coming off the tank. I don't know if you really do, but that's what the instructions say. Okay, so we just need it to be as long as this tube is, basically, which is around 2.5 inches. So we took a 2.5 inch piece of this and cut it off that wasn't crushed from us removing it, and we're just going to slide it back up in there into the pipe and force it back in, and then put the hose back on, put the hose clamp back on, put the cover back up, put the clips back in, and the next time we fill the tank, we'll see if it goes to full now. Okay, so we have it all put back together, and I'll upload this video, and next time I go put fuel in, we'll see if it actually goes to a full tank. Because when I did the sending unit, I did order one for a 20-gallon tank. So if this has only been taking 15 gallons, that makes sense why the sending unit is causing the gauge to only read 15 gallons. So this is kind of something that you need to know if you have to replace your sending unit. Since from 91 to 95, all the tanks are the same by appearance. If you don't know that you have that tube in there and you order a 20-gallon sender, the gauge is going to be off. If you have a 15-gallon sender and you put in there, and the tank's made to have 20 gallons, the gauge is going to be off also, but it's just going to read full for a long time. And then eventually it'll get down to 15 gallons and then below 15 gallons, and the gauge will start moving down. So if you do this conversion, you're going to need a 20-gallon sending unit to put in. I can't take credit for figuring this out or anything. Somebody mentioned it and said they did it, and they put a link to a page where it had a written description on how to do this. I'm just doing a video to show you how to do it visually. So next time I fill up, we'll see what happens, and I will put it in the description once I know whether or not this makes my gauge go to full now with a 20-gallon sender. Like and subscribe.